It seems like the Chicago Bulls can't catch a break. The schedule has been tough for this team that is undermanned. And now one of the stalwarts of this new look Chicago Bulls team is out for 6 to 8 weeks. Alex Caruso will undergo surgery early next week and be reevaluated in 6 to 8 weeks after sustaining a fracture of his right wrist in the game against the Milwaukee Bucks after that cheap shot, that flagrant 2 from Grayson Allen. And joining me, Mike Mercado, on this segment from the Sports Cubicle on WCBT 820 is the marvelous one, Dan Marver. And Marvelous, before we get into the schedule and what is happening to this Bulls team when it comes to wins and losses, this injury, let's talk about the play specifically. What did you think about the play, Grayson Allen following Alex Caruso, before we get into the actual ramifications of Caruso being out? What were your thoughts on the play?
Well, it was clearly a flagrant foul. I mean, Grayson Allen has a little history of being a punk, so this shouldn't surprise anyone. But I mean, I thought I was watching the World Wrestling Federation. It was like where they throw the opponent out of the ring. I mean, it was totally ridiculous. And the worst part is they show him smirking when he walks out of the building. So no remorse. And we were just talking about the penalties, 2 games, and I guess at 25,000, which is peanuts anyway to an NBA player. So there should be stiffer penalties, because it's obviously beyond flagrant 2. It was like a flagrant 10, if there was such a thing. But the Bulls had a bit of a wall. Obviously, they have lost some games now, and they're coming back to earth a little bit, but with the injuries that they've got, and that's Caruso aside, Levine and Ball, for example, they've been decimated, and they're doing the best they can. But then Milwaukee, it was not a blowout by any means. They were in the game even still, so that's going to be their toughest challenge to come out of the East, in my opinion. Maybe even Philadelphia a little bit, depending upon how Embiid performs. But it was totally uncalled for. It was ridiculous, and I mean, I almost think the penalty should be expulsion from the league. So, but we'll see.
I don't think you're not alone on this one, Marver. It's something that has united social media, which is such a rare thing. And just for like Marver was saying, just to give you a point of reference regarding potential Grayson Allen discipline, this is from Casey Johnson. There is a league precedent for $25,000 fine for the flagrant 2 fouls. Happened last season with Jamal Murray. And Marver, we talk about it, like even on social media. Milwaukee then tweeted it the morning after, when the news came out of Alex Caruso's injury, a GIF of Grayson Allen eating a donut, because obviously they're playing into, as you were talking about, the wrestling analogy, the heel, the bad guy. But it was in poor taste. And this is something we've seen a history of from Grayson Allen. I do think that the punishment and the crime are not going to be on the same level, and it's going to be frustrating for a lot of Bulls fans, because Caruso is such a big part of what this team is trying to do. And you were in that game against Milwaukee, which is a testament to how hard this team plays, how hard Io and Kobe, and specifically DeMar. And this Bulls team is going to need Vucevic to step up in a different way that he hasn't really done all season. There's been moments where we've seen him carry the team. There's been moments where we've seen him not necessarily carry the team, but at least do his part on the offensive side. And they're going to need that these next few weeks. And we were talking about the schedule, Marvelous One, and let me pick your brain on this one. You're scouting, as you've watched so much NBA basketball. This is a stretch of Bulls basketball. We've seen them play the Nets, the Warriors, the Celtics, the Grizzlies, the Cavs, the Bucks. But now they get to play the Magic, the Thunder, the Raptors, the Spurs, the Blazers, the Magic again, the Raptors again. You're playing the Pacers. And not until February 6th do you play the 76ers. Obviously, that's not going to be enough time to get a lot of these guys back, but hopefully by then, Zach LaVine will be back. Can the Bulls really, do you think the Bulls are going to maintain? How important is this stretch of basketball for this season, for this team to pick on the teams they're supposed to beat when typically they're at full strength?
Yeah, well, right now, I mean, for example, today they start with the Magic on the road. The Magic are 8-39. The Bulls are 28-16. So on paper, they should win that game even still. But the Thunder tomorrow might be a different story. It's hard to say. On a road trip, sometimes it's hard to maintain their success. But it will be a good test tomorrow in Oklahoma City. So those first two should be a good springboard to see how they're going to perform with their current lineup. The timetable is critical to see how quickly we get the guards back, particularly Vine and Ball, because they're the catalyst for the offense. I mean, they've had some good performances. They're stead by the Sumo and whatnot, but still, it would be good to have them at full strength. I'd be more confident about their ability to do well in this coming string of games.
You know, we've been talking for the last few weeks, specifically you and I, when we're talking about the Bulls, in what AK and Mark Eversley are going to do during this trade deadline. Are they going to be very aggressive? Are they going to stay more intact? Where are the cerebral minds of this Bulls front office? And we've been talking about it. We have a lot of faith in this front office because we've seen them be proactive and be aggressive. But Marver, if you were the GM of the Chicago Bulls and seeing where you're at right now, seeing what you need, how your depth is actually coming up big time. It was just a luxury and now is going to be the catalyst of this team for the next 6 to 8 weeks minimum. Are you going to be aggressive at the trade deadline, or do you think getting back a Lonzo Ball, a Zach LaVine, a Alex Caruso, and potentially Patrick Williams on your own team by the time April comes along, by the time May comes along for a playoff push? Where are you when it comes to the roster, how the roster is being constructed right now? Are you aggressive if you're AK Mark Eversley?
I'm going to be aggressive. I'm going to be aggressive. I think particularly now with the depleted roster, it's even more necessary for them to be aggressive, in my opinion. So, Kobe White and the Sumo have stepped up. So they may, it's going to be critical for them probably to be a major part of success, at least for the near term. So, but still, as we've discussed, a little bit of reinforcement in the front line might be what they need. They seem to have plenty of backline players, even with the injuries. But the front line looks to me like where they could do a little bit of tweaking and get some additional assistance without giving up. They don't want to give up a first round pick or a player with which is part of their future plans. But still, I think they could probably make a deal with one of the teams that's in need of whatever, where they can fit a need for them and fit a need for us, and maybe make a trade. That's what I would recommend.
And this is something that I talked with, who's a guest on today's episode of the Sports Cubicle later on, Josh Buckholzer. I mentioned to him that we saw the news of Paul Millsap and the Brooklyn Nets. And I think that is a perfect player. If you could find a way to sign a veteran, if Thaddeus Young finds his way out of San Antonio, these are the type of guys that you want. And I agree with you. They do need help with a big man. But if you could find a way, and this is what championship teams do, right? These are what teams that go far in the NBA playoffs do. They find these veterans that were on bad teams that are able to get out of their contracts. And then all of a sudden, when you're in the second round of the playoffs, you're like, how did so-and-so end up on the Miami Heat or the Golden State Warriors? This is where the Bulls need to put themselves in. And if you're able to, if the Bulls are confident enough where they're not going to make an aggressive move, I think, and I mentioned this in the same conversation I had with Josh, I think the front office has an idea whether or not Patrick Williams is going to be healthy this season. I don't think they're ever going to put pressure on him. I don't think they're going to be reports out there. This is a tight-knit front office. This is a tight-lipped front office. But I do think if they're not out there going for DeMarcus Cousins, then they must know something about getting a big back. So we're going to see in the next few weeks. But what do you think about that? A Paul Millsap, Thaddeus Young type, being able to bring in that type of veteran big man opposed to even having to get rid of any type of financial assets?
I agree that would be a good thing. I mean, they could perhaps get some depth in the guard position with a Jeff Teague or Mario Chalmers. Those names have been mentioned I've seen recently. So perhaps that might be a way to go too if they can't get the big guy. So because of the depletion at guard. So I think that either or would work. I mean, a little bit more strength at either position, maybe both would be helpful down the stretch, because there's a lot of games, in a short period of time too, and so they might want to not overwork everybody.
It ends up being huge to this big run that you had to start the season, right? The way DeMar DeRozan and Zach LaVine were carrying this team, the development of Kobe and Io, that this is a team that was able to give themselves enough life support in case something like this happened. And Marvin, you and I have watched enough basketball to know that every team in the NBA is going to go through moments like this. You're going to lose guys in the middle of an 82-game season. The question is, did you build enough of a lead in the standings? Is your roster competent enough with NBA players? You look at this roster compared to Bulls rosters the last 7 years, there are pros. And even the young guys are hungry. And you can see they're puppies with big paws. And that is something rare in the city we've seen almost the last decade. So before we move on to some more fun stuff, because there's plenty of fun stuff to talk about in the NBA, to kind of put ease the Bulls fan that is feeling really bad right now, because rightfully so, a lot of the big guns are not in the arsenal right now. But should Bulls fans still sleep okay at night knowing that there's still enough calendar left in the regular season, and if this team is good enough, they should be making a little bit of a playoff push?
I think that that start will probably enable them to make the playoffs, because in the East, you may be able to end up 500. If they actually totally collapsed and make the playoffs, which would, at this point, to end up 41-41, they'd have quite a bad spell. So I think they make the playoffs. I mean, I'd like to see them at least get the home court in the first round. Would be nice too, to keep up the pace they've been going on. But it would be remarkable if they did, with all that's going on with this team, because like we've been saying, the injuries and everything else going on. So I think that the fans should sleep well at night, knowing that this team is going to make the playoffs. What seed they'll be, it's hard to say, depending upon how they perform, because that good start is probably going to be enough to carry them, honestly, in my opinion.
And that's the hope, that the Bulls are going to be in a position where they're a top 4 seed and they have a easier matchup. And all you can do is try to get into the tournament and get a bite at the apple. But let us know your thoughts. Are you nervous about the Chicago Bulls? Do you think the Bulls front office should be aggressive? Let us know your thoughts. We're on Twitter at Sports Cubicle TV.